The Nintendo Switch, the console that kinda honestly saved Nintendo from the dark age of the Wii U. Now, to be granted, the Wii U wasn't the worst console in the world, but we can all kinda agree when the Nintendo Switch came out in 2017, it kinda reminded us that, oh wait, Nintendo actually knows what they're doing. But then, they made the Switch Lite. Now, disclaimer, I'm not saying that the Switch Lite is bad or anything, or it's a complete piece of garbage, but I do have to ask the question of, why? For a little background information, if you don't know, the Nintendo Switch Lite is kind of like the 2DS of the Nintendo Switch family, being a cheaper version of the Switch without all the fancy bells and whistles that most people realistically don't need, like the ability to dock to a TV, having removable Joy-Cons, a kickstand, the rumble pack, and probably other things that I'm completely forgetting. Now, it may sound like since the Switch Lite doesn't have all these features, it's most likely going to be a piece of crap, but the thing is, Nintendo has already done this before, and they've done it successfully. And that something is, well, you probably already guessed it, the Nintendo 2DS. Because back in 2013, when Nintendo first revealed the 2DS, most people just thought, why would I buy this over the 3DS? I mean, this can't even fold in half, doesn't have the 3D feature, and I mean, it's called a 3DS for a reason. But soon, people started to realize that the 2DS actually wasn't that bad. In fact, it was actually kind of better than the 3DS in some specific ways. And that same principle applies for both the Switch and the Switch Lite. Why would you buy a Switch that doesn't have the detachable Joy-Cons, the ability to switch between TV mode and handheld mode? But the thing is, it's exactly what the 3DS went through. The 2DS is just a 2D version of the 3DS, and the Switch Lite is just a light version of the Switch. But that's enough of me trying to explain why the Switch Lite isn't actually that horrible. Let's actually talk about what the Switch Lite's actually about. As I stated before, the Switch Lite is just a cheaper version of the normal Switch, but it's now a 100% portable console. This meant that you can't dock it to a TV, you don't have the detachable Joy-Cons, some games just won't work on this for some reason, I guess. Now, some people may think this is just dumb, and it kinda is, but the thing is, it just kinda works. Because, as I mentioned before, and I will use this analogy until I meet my grave, the Switch Lite is just the 2DS of the Switch family. Now for the part that most people just don't care about, the actual specs of the Switch Lite. Inside the Switch Lite, we have the ARM Cortex A57 plus A53 CPUs, the NVIDIA Tegra X1 Plus GPU, 4GB of LPDDR4 RAM, 32GB of eMMC storage. Now, I guarantee about probably 90% of you just don't know what the hell I'm just saying, and that's fine, I really don't either. I definitely didn't spend just 57 minutes researching this when I could be, watching hentai. Oh, I should probably delete this, But basically, the Switch Lite just has the same specs of the original version 1 of the Switch, but it instead has the NVIDIA Tegra X1 Plus GPU instead of the normal Tegra X1 GPU. But basically, this just means that the Switch Lite is just slightly more power efficient, so there you go. Now, speaking of power, the Switch Lite's battery life actually wasn't that bad, claiming to have an average battery life of 3 to 7 hours, which, I mean, compared to the version 1 Switch's battery life of 2.5 to 6.5 hours, but in a smaller package, that actually wasn't that bad. And I can actually personally say I did get an average of 5 to 6 hours of battery life on the Switch Lite, and this is me after owning this after about a year. So, not bad. Now for the screen, the Switch Lite had a 5.5-inch 1280 by 720p LCD screen with a PPI of 267, which compared to the normal Switch's screen of a 6.2-inch 1280 by 720p LCD screen had a PPI of 237, and I really don't understand why people are making such a big fuss about this. I mean, you're really only losing about 0.7 inches of actual screen real estate, and both screens do run at 720p, so if anything, games should technically look better on the Switch Lite. And I mean, it still gets the job done. You can still look at your games when you're playing, so I don't know. Then there's the Switch Lite's overall design, and I mean, yeah, it's still a Switch. I mean, a smaller all-in-one version of the Switch, but a Switch for sure. And in all honesty, I really can't bring myself to love the Switch Lite's design, but at the same time, I can't bring myself to hate it either. It's not bad or anything, it's just there. As I literally just said, the Switch Lite's overall design is really just a smaller all-in-one version of the normal Switch, and just by pure looks and aesthetics, it's pretty much just a better looking version of the PS Vita. And that's not a bad thing, to be honest. And for the overall build quality of the Switch Lite, it's actually pretty damn good. The entire thing is made out of plastic, but it's high grade quality plastic, not that cheap plastic you would find on like a $1 phone case. It's that high grade quality plastic that you would, what am I doing? I seriously just went on a 15-second rant about plastic. What? Now for the overall functionality of the Switch Lite, well, that's kind of another thing. Compared to the normal Switch, I mean, well, it's basically the exact same thing, to be honest. I mean, it does have all your standard basic things that the normal Switch has, such as your standard A, B, X, Y buttons, joystick, a D-pad instead of a second joystick, power button, your home button, your volume up and down rocker, a cartridge slot, a headphone jack, your shoulder buttons, basically almost everything that the normal Switch has. Now, for the actual differences between the two Switches, actually looking at the list I have, there's actually not that much, to be honest. The first and most obvious is the fact, well, you don't have the normal removable Joy-Cons. Now, you can still connect a pair of Joy-Cons and a Pro Controller to it, but you can't actually, physically put the Joy-Cons onto the Switch Lite itself. And then there's also no rumble feature because there's no actual Joy-Con with the actual rumble pack in it, which really isn't that important, so whatever. Then there's also no kickstand, which makes sense because the Switch Lite is a 100% portable console, so there's really no points because, I mean, you're not going to actually sit down and actually use this as a mini TV. And speaking of TV, the biggest difference is the fact that you can't dock the Switch Lite into a TV. Even if you use a Type-C to HDMI cable, it still won't work because, as I just said, the Switch Lite is a 100% portable console and nothing more. So what's it actually like to use the Switch Lite? I mean, it's kind of like the 2DS compared to the 3DS. When actually using it, it does feel different, but not in a bad way. I mean, compared to the normal Switch, playing games on the Switch Lite honestly feels essentially the exact same. Sure, the screen is slightly smaller, but after an hour or two, and honestly not even that, you get very used to it. And for the actual controls on the Switch Lite, well, it kind of feels the exact same compared to the normal Switch. To me personally, it does feel slightly more comfortable, but that's probably just due to the size of my hands, and that really all depends on you. But in general, it feels exactly like the normal Switch. And then for game support, well, the Switch Lite can play pretty much every single game that the normal Switch can, but games like 1-2 Switch, Just Dance, Super Mario Party, Fitness Boxing, Ring Fit Adventure, and Nintendo Labo, those games technically do work, but these games are meant to be played on a TV, so you really can't play them in portable mode. So keep that in mind if you're purely buying a Switch to play games like Ring Fit Adventure. So here's the question that no one really asked. Why is the Switch Lite a thing, and is it even worth it? Well, for the short answer is, well, just to provide people with the option of a cheaper version of the Switch. And as I said before, Nintendo has done this before with the 2DS, and they know how to do this, successfully. Now, for the question of whether or not the Switch Lite is actually worth it, well, it kinda is. Yes, technically it is worth the $200 MSRP that it should be, and if you only have $200 and you can get it for $200 or less, I guess, then yeah, go for it. But for my personal opinion, I would try to get a used normal Switch for around $250 or less, mainly due to the fact, well, the Switch Lite doesn't have detachable Joy-Cons, and for some reason your joysticks start to drift, or something else happens, you're kinda screwed. Because with a normal Switch, it's much easier to replace the joystick in a single Joy-Con than the entire console, so in case if you break something, you can just buy a new Joy-Con for like $50 or less, instead of paying, another $200 or so to, to replace the entire Switch. Also, you can dock it to a TV, you can play any game, it has somewhat better multiplayer support, I guess, jailbreaking, I guess, if you can get a low serial Switch for cheap. But overall, if you only have $200 and you can find a Switch Lite for $200, go for it. But if you're willing to wait and deal hunt a little, I would recommend trying to find a used Nintendo Switch set for $250 or less. Or you could just emulate it, but whatever.